thank you so much for joining in with this. And the important thing is for us to have a conversation with the police based on the survey. And Robert works really hard on asking people what they think about crime issues. And James, who is going to talk us through how situation has been over the last 4 months in terms of crime and what's happened with Thames Valley Police. James, are you there?
Are you ready for me?
Yeah, we're ready for you now. Let's go.
Fantastic. Good evening, everyone. My name is James Ellis. I'm the inspector that oversees what's now branded as community policing, but is also known as neighbourhood policing. The two terms are synonymous. Community policing is kind of where the national trend is going as regards how we brand ourselves. Community policing is one small facet of a very large, much larger machine. When people think about policing, they often think of response police, our uniformed colleagues who are working 24/7. They're attending those incidents that are coming in through our switchboards and are concerning crime attendants. Also, we have our investigating wing, again, far more substantial than the scope of neighbourhood policing in its numbers and capacity, and it's dealing with complex and serious investigations. Also, people will be acquainted with roads policing, armed police, who else? The list goes on. What does community policing offer? Well, we are the primary interface with our communities. Part of our statutory duties is to make sure that the policing we provide is reflective of the communities we serve, and this forum is an example of us looking to adhere to those tenets, to make sure that we are engaging and in dialogue, listening to your concerns. Will it be the mandate upon which we deliver policing? No, there are policing objectives that sit at a national level, at a force level, and those are an absolute requirement. I am beholden to more than one master, and they are governing the direction of which I deliver my contribution to policing. However, the likes of the survey that's just gone past and that will be discussed in this meeting is part and parcel of the conversation and determining what go forward as our priorities. And having this discussion means that I can be your mouthpiece, your voice within those decisions, and make sure that your views are reflected within that decision making. So without further ado, I'm going to go forward to my presentation, which hopefully should seamlessly come up for you. What I would say is, whilst I'm presenting, you might well find some bandwidth issues. If you disable your camera, which is like a camera icon that you can cross over, similarly, if you place yourself on mute, you might find that some of those problems alleviate. So I move forward. So the first thing that I'm very keen on delivering for you locally within the Chiltern and South Bucks districts is, which is the team that I oversee, is to be more candid and certainly be more focused on what, like you, I'm a resident within this area, and I want to make sure that if I were attending one of these meetings, that you're provided with the information that I would want. And so the first slide I've offered you here is actually a direct lift from one of the meetings that I attend on a bi-weekly basis, which looks to discuss a concept which we call neighbourhood crime. It's actually, I believe, recognised nationally. Certainly it's recognised at a force level, and it's essentially those crime types that are considered of greatest importance within our communities. And you can see there, I don't need to read this to you. The good news is, this is, as I say, a bi-weekly meeting. All of the trends across these crime types are showing a positive decline, which is good news. However, I recognise there's still work to do. We have got some significant numbers over a 2-week period, recognising that this area, which is the whole data for Buckinghamshire, is many hundreds of thousands of residents. But equally, there's room for improvement, but certainly there's some level of promise to the direction of travel when it comes to these crime types. What I would say as an aside is that this sort of information I'm looking to capture on a monthly basis, and I would highlight to you Thames Valley Alerts. I'm looking to much more greatly harness the value that Neighbourhood Alerts platform, the TV alerts, the way in which it's utilised, and I'm looking to provide a monthly roundup of this type, so that you as residents can think, right, where are my risks? What's coming over the horizon? Even if I'm not directly affected by crime, what are the trends looking like at the moment? So hopefully, I mean, it's a work in progress. Please be patient with me, but in due time, I would definitely advocate getting yourself signed up to Thames Valley Alerts, because that's where this sort of data will be delivered. I'm going to move on, and hopefully I can do that. Hurrah!
James, can I just jump in, James?
Yep.
In terms of those acronyms that have been used, which
I apologise.
I understand,
so
TOMV, yeah, and TFMV.
So theft of motor vehicle, theft from motor vehicle.
Okay, and that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And also, I would say there's a qualifier there. We are obliged to record offences regardless of their veracity. And some of that, there is a qualifier there at the bottom that some of these have been established as non-crimes. They still are reflected within the data, but I just offer that as a caveat. But in broad terms, and what this slide is meant to do, is give you some trend analysis there. Moving on to the next slide, I want to make sure that that's framed within the context of both the county and of the force as a whole. I'm not going to go over this data. What I will draw your attention to is both South Buckinghamshire, which is the district, and Chiltern, again the district, are showing some real significant declines. So I fully accept, we are not where we want to be when it comes to crime levels, but the trend is good in the fact that we are in decline, and you can see from a forced target of decreasing neighbourhood crime by 5%, we are well exceeding that. So, I've received advance notification of some of the data that's come out of the survey and some of the comments that have come from the survey. And so I've helped to shape my presentation in respect of that. I am very alive to the fact that burglary is the hot topic. And so what I wanted to do is, again, try and inform you of the sorts of information that I would want to know if I was on the outside looking in. So what Governor is, this is both to tell you of the threats, the risks that we identify, but also to make you aware of some of the good news and good work that's taking place on your behalf within policing. So again, I'm being quite candid. We're currently very interested in the whereabouts of a light-coloured VW T-Roc, which we believe to be involved in a series of creeper dwelling burglaries. That's an individual who's breaking into an occupied address and is prepared to essentially do that classic creeping scenario within a burglary. It's a particular method of offending here, using a lock snapper tool, or actually removing the entire sort of unit of double glazing from a window. So we've got some very active lines of inquiry on that. As you can imagine, we've identified a vehicle, but certainly from a neighbourhood watch perspective, certainly be on the lookout for that light-coloured VW T-Roc, and certainly if you see one in suspicious circumstances, it's something that we would want to know of in very fast time. Moving on to Operation Globe, again, this is an active series that we're investigating within the Chalfont and Gerrards Cross corridor of the A413. This one, again, method of offending is concerning smashing of windows. And again, what I just do as an aside is mention to you, or my own personal view of the value of protective film on your glass. It's something that can be achieved with relatively low cost and can be done from a DIY perspective. Certainly towards the rear aspect of large areas of glass, particularly doors and patio doors, French doors, whatever, the likes. In regards to that, we have, again, very active lines of investigation. We're looking at a dark blue BMW 320 as regards that. Again, exactly the same as the T-Roc. I'm looking to make sure that this sort of information is communicated out to our neighbourhood watch groups, certainly those that are it's going to be of particular pertinence, so that they could be looking out for these and similar. So incidents going forward, in addition to that monthly sort of trend publication that we're looking to produce, I will also be looking to produce fast time, be on the lookout for type messages, which will be informing the relevant neighbourhood watch groups, so that we can have a far more symbiotic relationship between community and policing. So again, very active investigation. Both of these are essentially offending groups that are coming into our area. It's often been hypothesized that we are exposed to that type of offending, that very few of our burglars are homegrown, although they do exist. But certainly those two elements I would raise to you. Operation Habitual I offer as a good news story. We've previously suffered a spate of car key burglaries, particularly within Wickham and South Bucks districts. And obviously
cars being the ultimate objective of those burglaries. That series has ceased as of mid-April, and coincided with the arrest and charge of a particular resident in the Slough area on suspicion of those matters. And the last series that I would offer to you is recognise that we're suffering some rural burglaries, particularly focused on power tools, garden tools and lawnmowers. And there's been a series of those within those described areas, the Chalfonts stretching all the way to Chesham and into Burnham and Denham. So, but within that window of 10 days, we've certainly suffered a spate. Obviously, that is hot off the press. That's of yesterday, and that might be continuing. So again, wanting to inform and make sure that you're aware of what's currently going on within policing and what we're identifying. That's something that I would look to share with the community, the affected communities. So community priorities, that's obviously a strong focus of this forum, this meeting. And again, relevant to some of the data that's come out of the surveys. I'll just tell you that we are now have adopted a new neighbourhood policing app, or a mobile application, whereby officers can have that app on their phone and will document their foot patrols within a hotspot zone. So it's actually identified, they're geolocated, and they are providing their 15-minute visible presence within those identified hotspots. Those are both for antisocial behaviour and for serious violence. Within this region, there are not any heat spots when it comes to serious violence. However, there are antisocial behaviour hotspots, and those are being utilised by my teams. Similarly, the application has other elements, and it can help officers upload salient information whilst on the move. So we're harnessing advancements in technology, and we're looking at incidents where other patrol activity can be recorded, documented, and incidents where we're engaged with our communities, those events, making sure that we are capturing all of that good work that we're delivering. Another theme that was quite evident within the feedback from the survey is the issue of pony and trap racing on the A413. I've discussed this within previous forums, and I have little to really advance the conversation from comments I've made previously. I recognise that there is a public expectation that this is a matter that the police should be solving. I've got to say, I think that we have invested significant amounts of staff hours, which equates to thousands of pounds worth of public funds on trying to address this by means of enforcement. However, we have a landscape. This specific road layout meets the requirements of this group, and they are going to be very resistant to moves to change that behaviour. I believe that, well, I have secured agreement as of a year ago now with the Community Safety Partnership that we would actually start to change the landscape of this piece of road to make it, to essentially salt the earth, to make it less appealing to individuals that are inclined to this sort of behaviour. I've yet to see significant progress on this, but I am reassured, or I understand that there is work ongoing on this matter. This has also been an issue that's been referred to the most senior chief officers within Thames Valley Police. There is a decision that has been made at the top levels that we can no longer sustain the level of intensive policing that
we have seen in previous years that I have looked to arrange, because we have so many other demands upon our staff's time. And so we need to be realistic. Ultimately, we are beholden to the policing mission. We are to protect life, to prevent serious injury, to detect and deter crime. So we need to be quite prescriptive and hold our partners to account when it comes to their contribution in this. And all I would say is, from my perspective, I would very much welcome advancements in order to start to prohibit the use of horses on that section of roadway, and to actually change the surfacing of that road, which will significantly inhibit the use of horses on it. I think that would probably give us the longest lasting solution to this issue. On the issue of theft of motor vehicles, theft from motor vehicles, we have Operation Pandilla, which is a collaboration of essentially all of the home county's forces, who come together as a task force to intensively police on particular crime themes. For this coming month, we will be hosting our colleagues from those neighbouring forces, and the focus will be vehicle crime. So there should be some really good news to be able to report in due course. I cannot allude to the specifics at this time because I don't want to compromise that good work that's planned. Another key theme is that of drugs. I can assure you this remains a focus of my teams. We have, as I've offered there as an example, that we have recently dismantled a cannabis plantation within the South Bucks district. And certainly from I review all crime investigations that my team hold, and I can assure you that there is a high percentage, somewhere in the region of 20 to 25% of the overall crimes that I review concern the supply of drugs and active prosecutions in the main when it comes to progress on that front. I'm conscious of time, so I am going to press on, give you more time for questions. So, other news. I want to make sure that you are aware of what's going on. We are currently carrying a number of vacancies, particularly within the South Bucks region. That is not compromising policing integrity or resilience. I've already alluded to the fact that we have operational 24/7 response police. We are an augmentation. We offer that contribution and that interface to the community. There have been a couple of challenges when it comes to some of the events that have been occurring within the South Bucks area, and whether or not we can offer police representation at those. I'm trying my best to accommodate those, but I am facing some challenges. The good news is that there are a number of different recruitment processes that are taking place at this time for both neighbourhood supervisors, who are essentially our senior PCs that line manage our PCSOs, also neighbourhood officers, which are our sort of routine neighbourhood police constables, and also an additional sergeant post, which has been agreed now from PCC funding. And in that situation, the region of Chiltern and South Bucks, my area of ownership, will be divided and apportioned to 2 sergeants in the manner that you see in that map. At the moment, one of my sergeants is with us in the meeting. Roy Evans is my sergeant for the Cheshire, Amersham and Missenden area. That will remain as is. The proposal will be that the additional sergeant will allow us to really reflect what I believe that the natural affinities when it comes to our communities. The Chalfonts, again, this is cognizant of the fact that we have some parameters provided to us by means of the community boards. We're looking to align to the structure of Buckinghamshire Council and their community boards, and these areas, so Beaconsfield and Chepping Y being one community board area, will be encompassed within the Chiltern and South Bucks region. It will be added to by the beaches, and that will be one sergeant's responsibility. Similarly, Chalfonts and Gerrards Cross, Denham, one community board. That will be added to the Ivors, and responsibility for one sergeant will hold responsibility for that, and obviously I will oversee those 3 sergeants. Quarterly updates is something that this area we've always maintained. I hope people do read them. Roy's done some really great pioneering work in translating that into a video edition recently, and it's something that in the future I'm hoping my teams will embrace and it will be just a more readily accessible media platform by which you can absorb some of those updates from our respective sergeants. I'm sure there's going to be some cajoling. I also want to make sure that we walk before we run. So I'm looking collectively for Buckinghamshire to raise its game to the standard that Chiltern and South Bucks already maintains. So producing those quarterly reports. Some of you will probably have seen that we've already started to bring that about with the setting of priorities further afield within Buckinghamshire. A little bit inexpertly delivered, but hopefully we'll start to refine that and we'll get up to a standard possibly somewhat resembling this in due course. But in the meantime, as those priorities are identified, we will then begin that quarterly process of reporting back on those priorities from from the land footprint of the Bucks Council in the context of Buckinghamshire, and all communities will be receiving those quarterly updates. And
James.
Carry on.
No, are you almost done?
I am, yes.
And I mean, there's a couple of hands up. Paul Griffin wants to ask you a question.
Well, I'm just gonna get to look. There you go. How fortuitous.
Ah, there we are. You're brilliant. Well, absolutely perfect timing. Paul, do you
get on to some Q&A?
Thank you, Chair. James. Well, Chairman, first of all, one thing, the chat doesn't appear to be working. Whether that's a decision or not, I'm not sure, but it would be useful to be able to comment in there. But James, we've had, as I'm sure you're aware, I hope you're aware, we've had quite a few recent ASB issues in the Ivors, particularly with youngsters and ball-bearing slingshots and smashed windows, etc., etc. That in itself is unfortunate, obviously, and hopefully just a small annoyance which could be resolved. As a perceived community leader, Buckinghamshire Unitary Councillor, I actually now don't have any phone numbers. I mean, we've known Roy for a long time. Obviously, he's like me. He's been around for 100 years. Brilliant. But when we had Dan here a couple of years ago, and forgive me for going back, Dan was everywhere all at once. He was a brilliant cop, absolutely superb. And I know he's gone on to bigger and better things, and I wish him all the best. What I'm lacking now is a direct contact. Can I have direct contacts with local cops, and can I inform them via text or WhatsApp or via any kind of messaging system? This is what's happening now. If you can attend, that would be great. Or do I have to go through 101, and I obviously don't want to go through 999 with an ASB issue?
Yeah, Paul, I would say good news and bad news is my answer here. At the moment, we are suffering, and I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. At the moment, I have one sergeant for the South Bucks region, and they are swamped. I'm sure nobody is surprised that elections and international football tournaments have a policing impact, and that is at a force level, and we are beholden to what the force requires. So availability is challenging at the moment. The good news, as I've alluded to within the presentation, is I am recruiting a new sergeant. That sergeant, I believe, will be landing within the Ivors, Denham, Gerrards Cross, Chalfont region.
Fantastic.
And certainly within the candidates that I understand will be interested in that position, certainly I know of some equivalents to Dan. Certainly
Wonderful.
some that I don't want to prejudice the process.
No. Yeah.
I will be chairing that recruitment process, and I will treat all candidates fairly. However, I know that the caliber broadly is high, and that will be good news. And being, I mean, we're all human, aren't we? And having an ability to actually have some focus on a particular region and start to see the wood for the trees is key if we're going to effectively tackle some of these issues. So watch this space is essentially the core to my answer. Hopefully we'll get back to that same working arrangement that you previously alluded to or you discussed and enjoyed. It's really a matter of, at the moment, I'm trying to essentially pull back some of the ground that we've lost when it's come to both abstractions, departures. It's not a simple process. Simply, there's no cupboard that I can pull new police officers out of. and it does take a time by means of
James, thanks for that. I mean, that conversation can go on offline. I've got AJ. Do you want to ask your question, AJ?
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, all. James, thanks for a very clear presentation and the points you have made overall within. I represent the community of British Asians living in Amersham, Chesham, and Chalfont. Andy, we had that discussion last year with Alex and PCC overall, and I just wanted to convey a couple of questions. First one, our community is facing quite a lot of WhatsApp group hacks where the hackers are posing as your friend or whoever. They are sending the messages and trying to extract some personal information, especially from the elderly, not only just British Asians, but others who we know are neighbors and stuff. So the question I have, James, is what is the Thames Valley Police doing about creating awareness, and how can we restrict this hacks going on? And they are quite significant. And secondly, overall, as a follow-up, you mentioned about the polls which we all contributed towards through to, and burglary was residential burglary was the top one. What other areas which came out which maybe you might not be expecting as really high up on the agenda of the locals? So those are the two questions I would like the answer, please. Thank you.
First question, if your last question first, I don't want to steal Robert Gibson's thunder. He will provide a presentation which will go through that data in quite significant detail. So I promise you there will be your questions on that front will be answered in due course. Okay. When it comes to what you're describing, cybercrime, online fraud and similar types of offences, first of all, Thames Valley Police has developed its own bespoke unit when it comes to online fraud or the cybercrime type aspect. There are a number of different elements to that. There's both an investigative branch that deals with digital investigation, and there's one that deals particularly with the vulnerable and looking to do international inquiries, because some of the offences of cybercrime occur broadly. This is a national policing issue. We're not alone in experiencing these sorts of situations. We also have a national body when it comes to online crime of this type, CEOPS, and that's a wealth of prevention advice that's available within CEOPS. Certainly, we have been running some local events in this regard. I know that the community, the Policing Issues Forum itself holds within its web pages advice on exactly this point, and there's been, I believe, some events that have been run locally and possibly recorded. Certainly, from my perspective, I'm very keen to get a definitive example of a prevention roadshow type event recorded, so that again we can hold that good information and we can broadcast that to all of our communities. That's not dependent upon being present at a particular time to receive it. So what I would say is, at all strata, at national, at force level, and locally, there is advice out there. Unfortunately, it's got to be said, and I qualify everything I've said. Many of the victims that we are dealing with, we are having flagged to us by other organisations, other banks particularly, who are resistant to being labelled as victims and will actively refuse to engage with the police because they are so caught up with the line that they've been given. So there are certainly some challenges, and it's very much an opportunity for us as broad communities. This isn't something that the police can solely deliver. It requires us to reach out to those around us, to publicise the risks that are out there regarding online crime, and to make sure that those most vulnerable and susceptible to it are alert to those risks.
James, so, as the chair, I'm going to jump in again because you're working really hard. AJ, just to come back to your point, because I think you were at the meeting where we had the Police and Crime Commissioner in Chesham Town Hall, didn't we?
Correct. Yeah,
You were at that meeting,
I
and I mean,
facilitated that, yes.
in terms of cybercrime, it's a really big issue, but it's sort of slightly outside the remit of neighbourhood policing. But it's dreadful. It is dreadful.
And absolutely, and I just want to take the opportunity, James, because you mentioned about you're working and there will be a certain either broadcast or certain recorded event. If there is an opportunity to have that directly with us, we can engage our 800 strong community and drive that at least with the people we know, so that we can help you to combat that proactively. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, again, my stance on this is that we need to harness advances in technology. Once we have a product that can help to communicate those risks, then again, I've mentioned TV alerts. We have obviously our social media channels. We'll be looking to try and publicise that once we've got a product that is of use. But again, I don't want to reinvent the wheels. My team have so many demands upon them. Yes, we have a role to prevent risk to our communities, but there are bespoke agencies, and I want to make sure that their expertise is harnessed in what we deliver to our community. So I'm hoping that there will be products out there, and I would encourage us all to research if there is anything that is of value that can be shared more broadly.
James, I'm going to have to be a bit difficult, not with you, but I've got looking at the screen, I've got a number of questions coming in. I've got 4 questions from one person, but let's go. Robert, Treasure, can you go next?
Yep. Hi. All my questions actually come at a lower level than AJ's there and are related to Holmer Green. And I'm just going to canter through them, but they all speak to the points that Paul Griffin was raising. And I think the central issue, and the reason I dialed in tonight, was about communication. And Paul talked about having access to at the time of a problem. And I think that really fits with everything that I would want to say and all the points I'm going to mention. Speeding, when it's happening, you need to talk to someone. When there's a road safety issue, you need to talk to someone. To give you examples in the village, Holmer Green, as I think I mentioned, at the end of last week, we had 2 motorbikes racing up and down New Pond Road, doing wheelies and hitting about 70 miles an hour before braking hard to stop at the crossroads. Very dangerous. But when something, and this was repeatedly, went on for about half an hour, I went out with a camera to actually video them. They cleared off. But the point is being able to contact someone without going to 999. Absolutely buy that. And we also got instances on the speed camera of 70 miles an hour along the Wickham Road in Holmer Green. Road safety, big issue. There seems to be a complete absence of police attendance at some of the schools. Real issue at the top of Criers Hill, where parents are insisting on crossing a very busy road with their children as almost the barrier to create space. Somebody needs to attend these places and just try and stop it. And I think visibility is the key there. Parking all around the village is horrendous, particularly on a Friday afternoon at the Old Oak pub. The pavements are regularly blocked. People with prams, elderly people have to walk in the road to get around it because they know nobody's ever going to go along there. Abandoned lorry we've got near the Earl Howe pub that nobody seems interested in doing anything about. And vehicles that are untaxed, reported. I know that's not a police issue. It goes back to the DVLC. But when they're repeatedly untaxed and repeatedly reported and nothing happens and they carry on driving them every day for work, it gets pretty disheartening. A couple of very final points. I think it'd be a really good idea if you would consider one of your constable, sergeant, whoever, attending a village society meeting to have a direct conversation here, if you think that's appropriate. And then I won't take up the rest of the time on this meeting. And the final point is, and I don't know, again, if you can do anything about this, more and more very big, very heavy lorries are using Holmer Green as a rat run. Now, some of those definitely come from HS2, as we could all surmise, but a lot of them, I think, are probably driven by sat-navs. Now, whether you can do anything about that, whether or not that's your area, I don't know. That's kind of a brain dump, and I am sorry, but it's all comes back to that first point about communication and being able to reach out without having to go to the absolutely tiresome, long-winded 101 that just doesn't get the job done. And I'm hoping that what you will say at some point is that when you are properly staffed, there will be better access. That's me over. Thank you.
Robert, thank you very
Robert.
much for your point.
I'm going to just jump in on and respond to some of those points in broad terms. What I would say is that my teams, I want to be out in the communities. I want to be dealing with problems. In some ways, I want to unburden them from community meetings because I want them to be out actually doing their job, which is fighting crime. When it comes to some of the issues you talk about, well, as you identify, the police might not always be the natural lead agency. We talk about issues at school, parking. Yes, police can have a role there, but also we need to be more collaborative. There's a concept of community resilience, which is talked about on the forum site. I invite you to have a read over that, because we really are in a challenging situation. The demands placed upon police are abundant, and we need to. That's part of the reason behind this meeting, is that we need to be able to focus on what is of greatest concern, rather than just be inundated with lots and lots of different voices. So, I appreciate that there are issues and concerns, particularly within your and I will look to try and offer what service I can. But I also need to be realistic with you that we cannot carry the can on everything, and we need to be looking at harnessing community boards to act as that community forum where there are particular issues. I will certainly commit my staff to sitting within that forum, the community board structure, and to be part of workshopping and a working group to explore means by which we can actually tackle the long-term solution to these issues, rather than the sticking plaster approach, which we've gone past that point. We need to actually look for lasting solutions, because we cannot continue to beat our head against the wall.
You've made the point really well, and the fact is the police can't solve all the problems of our society, because that's why we have local authorities and government.
Thanks for all those answers. I appreciate that. The only point I'll make, and then I'll shut up, is that the complete absence of anybody allows a vacuum into which all manner of things expand, and that is exactly what we're experiencing in the village. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert, for that. David Alder, because we need to press on, because otherwise we're going to be here until breakfast.
Yeah, I will be very brief as usual, Andy. James, many thanks for your presentation. Great progress in difficult circumstances. You touched on Neighbourhood Watch, which obviously I have little to do with these days. I see a few names, I'm sure, of Neighbourhood Watch coordinators here tonight, but I'm a bit concerned if you have a regular input at a more senior level with Neighbourhood Watch. I have the feeling, as I hear very little from the organisation myself these days, despite my close involvement in the past, that you might not be getting the support from that organisation that would be of assistance, not least in answering some of the problems like what's happening in Homer Green, for example.
Yeah, thank you, David. What I would say in response to that is that I see some great opportunities when it comes to collaboration with Neighbourhood Watch. My colleague Jodie Duggan is an inspector that's holding the Neighbourhood Watch portfolio now, and I've been in discussion with her about some of those projects I've already mentioned, and other elements by which we can best harness each other and work in a more homogeneous manner. So I think that it's a work in progress. It won't. Some of the issues have been recognised, and I know that Robert himself has been looking to try and bridge some of those issues recently. But there is a bigger plan in the offing. It might take a little bit of time to land, but hopefully we will end up with a really good product where we have a very strong community interface, where salient information is being delivered to our communities in a timely manner that can help build their resilience, can enable us with a flow of information to help be more effective in delivering both enforcement and preventative activity. And hopefully it will mean that again we just improve the lovely surrounds that Chiltern South Bucks offers and make it a safe place to live.
James, thanks very much. I'm going to just go because we need to move on a bit, but just one last question from JM.
Yeah, so sorry, this is Jignesh here. I'm also part of the same community what Ajay was mentioning. So I don't have any questions, but I'm here to help because I heard, James, from you that for cybercrime, you're not finding any victims. So if you need any help from the victims' perspective, how they do it and what they do it for the cybercrime, and I also registered the complaint with Action Pro team, but unfortunately nothing has happened. So in that regard, I might be able to help you. If you need any help, and anybody can contact me anytime.
Well, can you chuck your details into the chat box so
Yeah,
we've got
I'll do that. Yeah.
I would also highlight some of the discussion that's been taking place in the chat box. We've got the cyber helpline that Roy's signposted everybody to here. There are resources out there. You know your communities probably as well, if not better than I. We know the neighbours near to us that might be susceptible of this, or those within our wider family. If we can share that information, forewarned is forearmed, and we can start to make sure that as a wider community we're more resilient to those sorts of ploys. But thank you very much for the offer. And again, what I would also do is signpost to you towards your community board. Those are the established official platforms by which local communities can come together to build resilience on a number of different crime issues, as well as other issues.
James, I'm going to take one more question before we move on to Robert, which is from Jane Hudson.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to go back to the when you mentioned about the travellers and the pony trap racing, which for the people who live nearby is very distressing because they are extremely intimidating and they do block the road at the time. And I just wondered, who are the other partners that are involved in trying to do something about this that we perhaps need to lobby?
I can testify that I was one of the department heads, so it was myself, Highways Bucks and Community Safety Partnership from Bucks Council that were all in attendance on the 413. We had a dialogue. I hope as a resident, maybe not recently, but in years gone by, you've seen some really quite intensive policing of these events.
No,
I've tried my best. It's been waves crashing against the rocks.
No, that isn't the case. I have telephoned myself before now, well, recently, because it's chaotic and the cars.
I understand the situation recently. That's part of that is because I have a mandate from Assistant Chief Constable Bunt that tells me I cannot conduct proactive operations to deflect these events. So I am mandated that I must simply respond to these incidents. It's also got to be said, I've said already, we need to be building community resilience. Why? I mean, if somebody had a hole in a dam, we wouldn't continue to go up there and put chewing gum in it. We would look to repair the dam. We have the opportunity to change the characteristics of the roads, which will give a lasting solution, and it will deter your community from suffering this blight. I understand, and I understand the impact it has. I have tried my damnedest by delivering the resource that I have, which is police officers, and I have done my best and had some successes in preventing and averting those events. But there must be an end to that. And essentially, a chief officer has told me, no, you cannot sustain this anymore. We have so many other different demands placed upon us.
Okay,
also,
so
I'm going to intervene there. That's legal.
Thank you. So it's the highways people that are doing the roads.
I would recommend that the next expectation should be that, again, I signposted to your community board. I've been in regular dialogue with the community board on developments on this. They have my understanding of this situation at the current level. So yeah, there are opportunities for advancements of this issue from my perspective, but they're not within my gift to be able to influence those at this time.
No,
Okay.
Jay, maybe. I mean, I'm going to be flippant here because we have to move on because
Yes,
you
I
know
understand.
we at some point we've got to go to bed. But I think what we should do is to get them to race round the Pedner Loop as opposed to on a main road. That would be fun.
I've looked at some lateral
that's
things.
just a
I've
flippant
looked at
answer.
clearing out an airfield. I don't think that that's the long-term solution. What we've got to do, this is a national issue. It's something that will take a lot of political leverage to solve it in its entirety.
But
what I am conscious of is the impact locally. That's within my area of ownership. I'm trying my best to affect that. I have a partnership plan. I'm trying to deliver on it. It's now incumbent upon partners to deliver on their respective elements.
well, I think some of us who are not involved in that detail that you are, I think, bless you for keeping going with it. But let's take them off the roads and race around the airfields or the Pedner Loop. Anyway, let's move on to. Have we got any more hands up? No, we haven't. Let's move on to Robert, who has done so much great work in terms of saying what's happening in the community. Robert, are you still with us, or have you got?
Yep.
You've gone to bed.
Nope, not yet. Right. Can you see that? Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. Can everybody see it? More or less. Good. Okay. So if you can see this, you can see that this is the cover sheet, Survey of Residents' Concerns, June 2024. I will go through it pretty quickly, but if anybody wants to stop me and ask a particular question, keeping in mind I can't see the chat bar. So if anybody sees something in the chat bar that needs throwing out as well, somebody needs to say something, because I can only see the presentation. So number one, why we're here. On the left-hand side, we see the graphic that we've had for quite a long time, which explains the process that we were originally asked to do 6 years ago by Chiltern District Council and Thames Valley Police, and which we've continued doing with Thames Valley Police. We survey, we have this meeting, we make some decisions over what the focus areas are, and that doesn't mean that these are the things that are policed with the exclusion of everything else. And James has explained that in the past, but if anybody wants to ask again, I'm sure he'll explain. But the great thing is that this is done quickly, it's done transparently, and within a week or so of the survey closing, we've had this meeting, we've analysed the inputs, and the decisions are actually in the police team's worksheets. James did explain at the last meeting also about how not only are the inputs passed down to the teams, but also he passes them up to the to people who make decisions on resource allocation and that sort of thing. So it is it's a useful process to the police, certainly, and James always stresses that. We've found engagement again hard work. It always is. The difference is, sparing David Alder's blushes, in the graphic on the left, is that in those two surveys, which are well attended, we got a lot of engagement from Neighbourhood Watch around Chiltern, and if we can get back into that flow, that would be very helpful. However, on the upside, it was figured that last time we had enough in the way of trends to go to town with. Well, this time, because Beaconsfield's been dropped out of our coverage, we had 6 community board rather than 7, and we were up in terms of responses. Amersham was the biggest, and actually Ajay, who's spoken, his group was obviously quite prominent in that feedback. You can see at the bottom, that we covered a lot of bases, but we need to think smarter, I think, in the future. What came out of it was, and if you look at, actually, I'll go to the next one. That was the shape of the survey responses last time round. this is the shape this time round. So you can see that burglary really, was uppermost in respondents' minds, and I'll show you some reasons why that would be in a moment. Drugs moved up to number 2. It's the first time it's been number 2. It is currently a focus area, and being number 2, we probably won't drop it. I don't know. One of the things that in particular I noticed is that vehicle crime has popped up significantly, and it was interesting to hear James mentioning it. Rogue traders and scams. Again, we talked a little bit about cybercrime and other things of that nature. People are paying attention to that, and it is, of course, the crime type that you and I are most likely to fall victim to these days. Something like 40% of crime in the UK. But the big thing here is burglary and how high it is. Okay, and that was just for comparison. As I say, you can see how the burglary, speeding, antisocial behaviour, drugs, which are normally the first 4, were sort of within 10% of each other, or 20% of each other, whereas burglary's gone way up, and ASB for the first time, I think, dropped down to 5. That's a similar sort of thing looking across 4 surveys. Burglary is always the top. Drugs, because of how high burglary was this time, the vote shares get sort of flattened off somewhat across all the others, and therefore the fact that vehicle crime and rogue traders and scams were actually up, whilst the extent of burglary was flattening down the numbers, do stand out. Drugs very consistent, speeding pretty consistent. This is a little exercise where we have actually, as on James's presentation, we have theft from a vehicle and theft of a vehicle as 2 categories. What I've done here is I've put them together as one category, but I've made an adjustment. So if somebody voted for both theft of and theft from, that counts as 1 vote, not 2. But by making that adjustment, you can see that burglary and vehicle crime, which are both basically acquisitive crimes, are quite dominant in the survey. So acquisitive, people are concerned about acquisitive crimes. Then as I always do, I break down the concerns by community board area. And what you can see there is burglary is top everywhere, except in my home patch, the Missendens, where for the 8th consecutive time, speeding has ended up as the top thing. Last November, I got the Police and Crime Commissioner down here to host a meeting about Community Speedwatch and how people can make a difference by joining Community Speedwatch. We followed that up in May with some taster sessions for Community Speedwatch, and we did get one more scheme and we did get some more volunteers, and I'll be touching on this sort of thing later. You can see the vehicles coming up. It was interesting that antisocial behaviour was less dominant than it was last time round. Drugs only appears in 2 of the 6 community boards, but it was sufficiently spread across all the others to come out still as the number 2 concern after burglary when you totted up all the votes. Under 18s, we had 20 people claiming to be under 18 filling in the survey, but I do know of one who definitely isn't, so I'm not quite sure what was going on there. So there we are. But again, so the message is burglary, the message is drugs, I think, and you can see the vehicles being much more of a concern. Speeding, still quite a concern, particularly in my locality. This is actually, next one, it just shows you November 2023, the last time we had a survey. And you can see how much more antisocial behaviour was dominant. We will see we will see some graphs on antisocial behaviour, and that tends to be much more of a factor in the summer, and it may be the fact that it was a November survey conditioned some of the voters to still be quite cross about things that have been happening of an antisocial nature. These next 6 I'm going to go through very quickly. I've just put graphs together for the 6 community boards, and I'm going to go through them, and you can just see the way the graphs change in shape. So Amersham was 95% burglary, okay, and you can see also theft of a vehicle, so acquisitive stuff. But if I just move down, beaches flatter, nothing absolutely standing out there. Chesham and villages, we didn't get much of a response from Chesham. We always struggle there, but at least you can see where burglary was. And then drugs, that was one of the 2 places where drugs was number 2. Denham, Gerrard Cross and Chalfonts, burglary there again. Antisocial behaviour was higher than some. This is a Missendens, speeding the number 1, as I mentioned, otherwise relatively flat and within the trends. And again, Wexham and Ivor, high burglary, very high burglary, also high theft from a vehicle. But if I just go back there, and you can see how the things sort of change around. So it's not uniform how the various areas vote. I said we'd talk about why people seem to be so exercised about burglary. I get data from police.uk, which is always a month or 2 back, and it only covers a certain number of types of crime. But most, and I've got it going back to 8-10 years or something. But so this series is just looking back 2.5 years, and you can see that the trend is kind of upwards. Remember that it was very low during COVID, and it's sort of upwards. And there was a bit of a spike in the winter of 22-3, and then it came off, and then there was a bit more of a spike in 23-4. So it's unsurprising that people are noticing it. And I'll show you another 2 graphs. So this actually is the reason there's more than 6, which is how many community boards we have, is that these are actually police crime areas which are reported by police.uk. And you'll see that in all of these areas, there's been a spike at some stage. They haven't necessarily been all the same time, but again, it's in people's consciousness, and then they get onto WhatsApp, and then they get onto Facebook, and so on. So it's really not surprising that it's a concern in most places. In my area, we were used to sort of like 2 or 3 a month. We now seem to have settled into about 5 a month, and one notices the difference. And this next graph is quite interesting. 2 of them. Okay, so it is true that if you look at burglary and theft, the long-term secular trend has been down since the mid-90s, and that's partly because people have better security systems, and it's partly because villains have other things to go and have a stab at, and particularly things online and so on. But it's that is the long-term trend. But if you look at the right, which again, this is police.uk data, I show the data for the last 8 years, and I put in a 12-month trend line. And what you can see is that it sort of went up, and then that third quadrant coincided more or less with COVID and lockdowns and so on. And then it's been on the pickup. And the last couple of times we've done this exercise, I sort of said, "Oh, we've had a bit of a spike, but as long as it goes down, the trend line will come down." Well, it hasn't. So again, you can kind of understand why people are concerned, and it's fairly cold comfort to say, well, it's way down on 30 years ago. So that I thought was quite interesting. Drugs, as we say, that's the number 2 concern, and we have had drugs as a focus area for neighbourhood policing for about 15 months now. And we had it also at an earlier stage. We've now done 19 of these cycles, but in the current form, it's been a focus area for about 15 months. We were warned by James Ellis's predecessor that if we put it on the priorities, we would cause a statistical drug crime wave, because they'd be out there enforcing, and the numbers would pick up. But nonetheless, it is relatively low recorded crime, average of 16.5 per month across Chiltern and South Bucks. I think we all know that there's a lot of drug use and so on going on around the place and in parks and so on. And every now and again we hear of cannabis farms. In fact, James mentioned one in his survey. And there is obviously the concern that drugs promote further harms, further types of criminal activity and so on. So that's kind of the background for when we start talking again about priorities and focus areas. Speeding, there's no data on police.uk on speeding, but we know that people get pretty cross about it. I mentioned that my particular area votes it top every time, and it was about a year ago, I suppose, less than a year ago, when we'd had another community board meeting and people were talking about speeding. So I went to my community board chair and said, well, between the forum and the community board, we should have a meeting. And I alluded to this earlier, and we should get people more aware of the fact that Community Speedwatch is a much more effective tool than it was, say, 5 years ago. People are able to implement data, they're able to use data much quicker and much more transparently. And we need to get people to understand it and to an extent buy into it. I went for a training session, one of these taster sessions I mentioned, and actually, nobody tried to assault me. I'm quite big, I suppose. And, on the whole, people sort of waved at us rather than gave us the finger. So it's not as unpleasant as one might think. And it does help your communities. And I'll come on to in a moment some of the changes we've made on the website to highlight this a bit more. Antisocial behaviour, I mentioned, had slipped back a bit, but of course it is a catch-all of all sorts of types of behaviour. And Roy, who's here from the police today, about 3 or 4 years ago said to us, well, the trouble with telling us that we must treat antisocial behaviour as a focus area is that it is such a wide list of behaviours, it's quite difficult for us to know sort of what we are focusing on. So you need actually to tell us what we're focusing on, to which my response these days is, well, your local sergeants will have and your local teams will actually have a fairly good idea of what the particular type of ASB is in your area. But that's again the sort of background. What you do see is this seasonality. The yobs come out in the summer, they go and do something else in the winter, they come out again in the summer, and they go and do something else again in the winter. So that's a quick thing on ASB. Violent. I put this one in, and I mentioned that on the whole, various these reported crime trends have sort of flat to down. I'm glad to see this one slightly down. It is. I mentioned earlier that that cybercrime, online crime, is the type of crime you're most likely to be victim of, and that's true. But within the reported crimes, which exclude cybercrime, this violence and sexual assault is always the top, with about 1/3 to 40% of the crimes. But the trouble is, again, it's a great catch-all category. So it goes from people being called names in the street to some serious, unpleasant offending. So one thing I would say is that what I can't do from the police.uk stuff, and we might ask James in a moment, to mention, so what the conversations in Thames Valley Police and what the type of work in Thames Valley Police is when it comes to things like domestic crime and violence against women and girls. I've put in a couple of links there to the Thames Valley Police and Crime Commissioner's page on what their work on violence against women and girls, and similarly on the Thames Valley Police strategy on violence against women and girls. I know that within the Buckinghamshire Council cabinet, or was it full council, about 10 days ago, I was told there's quite a lot of talk about the council strategy on violence against women and girls. We know that it's something that's very much a national, focus and so on, but it's not something I can get much of a handle on. So that's all I'll say there. In the other category, we've talked a little bit about parking, bad driving, pony and trap racing. A number of people talked about that major fire that went on for several weeks on that development site at Holmer Green, and the others are all fairly not surprising. Yeah, I would just say that a very important thing within our process is that we encourage people to use the comments box. We know that the list of crime types that we put on the survey is a little bit sort of constricting, and it does, it has to be, because it has to apply to the sorts of things that our neighbourhood policing will realistically lead on, and also stuff that we can get data on. But whatever's on your mind, put it in the comments box. It all gets collated, it all gets passed on, and they, if there are things that need to be attended to, I would always recommend that people use the comments box. Before I go, a little bit of advertising. When we started this 6 years ago, we had no idea what we were being asked to do, and it also took quite a long time really to work out, the sort of structure of the police and and the way that the police and other agencies work, and all those sorts of things. So anyway, one of the reasons we haven't had a cycle in the first part of this year is that we were putting effort into revamping what we do on the website, and actually in terms of some actual work as well. And so what I've done is I've refocused it so that it basically has 4 areas. It has our original remit, which is obviously holding these surveys and helping the police define neighbourhood priorities. But I also have done three other main pillars, which are areas where residents can contribute in some way to helping make their own premises, their own selves more resilient, and their communities more resilient. One we've talked about is Neighbourhood Watch, and so we have a section in there which, among other things, tells you how to join a Neighbourhood Watch scheme, where to go to get the information, find out whether there is one, and if there isn't one locally, how to set one up, and so on. Ditto speeding and Community Speed Watch. How do you join Community Speed Watch? What are the stages you go around? How do you find whether there's one locally? How do you set one up if not? On the scams and frauds, it's somewhat different. Obviously, the main stress is on trying to inform people, give them much more information, much more access to knowledge and understanding to help make them resilient. I put in the chat box the name of the guy who heads up the TVP cyber and online crime unit, and I came across him because we had a resident on the edge of Beaconsfield who summoned us and said that he'd nearly lost some enormous amount of money through an authorized push payment scam, but managed at the last minute not to. But he was telling us that that the whole system for policing online crime was completely hopeless, and that he particularly absolutely said, as a matter of fact, that Thames Valley Police has no resources at all for investigating or pursuing online crime. Well, I thought that was a little unlikely, so I went and found the man who runs the unit, and he was very helpful. He told me exactly what resources he had. There were 6 teams, and what they do. Honestly, he also recognises that you're not going to manage to enforce your way out of the online crime thing, and that the best thing to do is to inform yourself and inform others against the dangers, make people much more familiar with the dangers. But he did say, and this comes back to what Ajay was saying, that he is anxious to help get that message out there. So I hope he might be a useful contact. Last thing about the website, we are the one place where you can get a comprehensive collection of the neighbourhood policing reports, and there's a page for that, dedicated page for those, and they're very good. And as James says, our neighbourhood teams here in Chiltern and South Bucks have led the way on that, and maybe we'll have a little podcast or two. Who knows? From what James was saying. Who remembers Huey Green? I think he rather. I think he rather fell out of favour, didn't he? So make your mind up time, folks. So that gives you an idea of the last 6 cycles, last 5 cycles. Where are we going to go this time? And that, I think, is it.
Robert, thank you so much, and you do so much work for this community. It's absolutely incredible, and we would give you a round of applause if we can do that online, because he is so. Let's and the amount of detail it has, which informs us all, is brilliant. The question is what we do with it all. That's another matter. But are there any questions for Robert?
I've a question, Chair, if I might.
Yep.
Speedwatch. I got involved with Community Speedwatch before I was a councillor, probably 10 or 12 years ago, and it was actually quite good fun. Ironically, we found that the majority of the people that were complaining about speed were residents, and the majority of people that were speeding were, funnily enough, residents. So we took those stats back as much as we could. My question really is, perhaps for you and perhaps for James, is what teeth does Speedwatch have? Because when I did it that long ago, it was a letter saying you've been naughty, and if we catch you again, we'll send you another letter saying you've been naughty. Is there any more to it? Robert, James, I don't know who wants to answer that question. It seems valid. It seems really good to have civilians doing this kind of stuff, but does it have any value?
In short, Paul, it's a tiered response. So it starts off, as you allude to, with a letter, but it's very much a matter of repeat offenders start passing on to different lists, which will essentially culminate in a target package for roads policing. I need to qualify that neighbourhood policing is not the owner of road safety. We augment based on communities' concerns. Roads policing are obviously naturally going to own road safety, but those target packages are delivered by the roads policing department, and that is the teeth that you refer to.
Right.
The other thing I'd just add, sorry, I'm just jotting down the minutes. The other thing I'd add is that there's much more joined up thinking now. So if somebody is caught speeding in Hertfordshire and in Buckinghamshire, the system will pick that up. And so that there's more joined up thinking.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Briefly, very briefly.
David.
Sorry, I'm just going to finish one thing. Can we get a download of Robert's slides, please? Because they are, I think, extraordinary and very useful.
Yeah,
he-
they'll be on.
he's pretty good, isn't he?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
They'll be on the website
right.
after this meeting. So
Thank
David
you.
Alder, you've got a question.
Not so much a question, Robert. I'm not sure that Duncan Wynne would welcome an awful lot of queries. An incredibly busy man. I think for queries on cybercrime, the preferred contact is the National Cyber Security Centre, which obviously anyone can find by Googling. They're the people who hold most of the information and guidance, and I would recommend people contact them if they have problems.
I think that's right. Although I think that if one could get an event together, he certainly indicated he'd be quite glad to come and perform.
Excellent.
And all I would add to that is, if such event were to transpire, I'd please record it so that we capture that learning, and we can then cascade that more broadly for those that aren't in attendance on the day.
I think that's a good point.
Chair, if I might just mention something in the chat concerning fly tipping. Thank you very much to Councillor Matthews that's mentioned that we work in partnership with Bucks Council on that matter. What I will just apprise the meeting of is there is a particular type of fly tipping. It's at an industrial scale. We classify it as op Angola. It often involves the traveller community, which will invade a section of land, control it, and essentially will then dump waste, and a massive cost to a local authority in clearing that, or the landowner if it is private land. We've had some really good successes over the last few months. I've been working in close alliance with my counterparts within the Bucks Council, and we've made some significant arrests. We've really set the bar when it comes to zero tolerance for that type of offending, which I think is, again, I've already alluded to the cost of the taxpayer, key in delivering that. We have certainly saved many hundreds of thousands of pounds in clearance fees by taking some really robust action. And that's the sort of priorities that, again, I'm making those sorts of decisions. I'm hoping that I have put the public support in making sure that we're delivering on those sorts of issues.
But James, just for my indulgence, in terms of what have you done which makes a difference?
So stereotypically, it would usually start as what would be presumed to be an unauthorised encampment. It actually isn't. It's usually just a security guard, for want of a better term, one individual or maybe two that will essentially be the gate control, and they will allow copious numbers of flatbed lorries into the site to dump off waste that they have collected nefariously, from cash in hand type jobs at building sites and similar across many counties. They will then come into the land and they can offload at zero cost, so they're circumventing the charges that would be incurred if they were to try and dump that appropriately at a waste depot, and so therefore a high value enterprise. What we've done is utilised arrest powers. We've also brought partners agencies in. So we've got the Environment Agency, who actually are meant to be leading on that. We've schooled them on their role to play on that. So as stereotypical and customary investigators, we've been able to upskill our Environment Agency counterparts in what a criminal investigation entails. We've been able to get support from the Bucks Council when it comes to waste carrier compliance road checks in the near vicinity, and that's I think that's a real trump card, and that's occurred on 3 instances within the last, I would say, 3 months, where we have through early intervention and robust action, we have made a real change in how we're delivering on that particular aspect. And so I just mentioned that because obviously there's context of fly tipping. I recognise that there are other instances that happen, but we're really starting at the head of the beast, as it were. The key offenders, if we can. This is an organised crime sort of syndicate that is involved in this sort of stuff. And if we can start to tackle our main offenders, we start working our way down the list there and addressing those issues.
And good for you, James. But there are tricky people about, aren't there? And we need to catch them. But in terms of moving forward, because we all need to go and do something else at some point. But in terms of priority for your service, we need to think whether we say, I mean, for me as the chair, in terms of what we're going to set the priorities for over the next 4 months, I would suggest burglary, drugs and speeding, which is what's come out of the survey. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, if you're asking for my views, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I want to engage the community, and I want them to, as I've described, I want to be your mouthpiece. So I would invite the floor any dissenting views or any alternative views.
Well, Barbara's got a thumb up, but you haven't got. Hang on, let's do Paul Griffin first.
No, I think David's first. David Alder.
Oh, go on, David. You go first.
I forgot to let my hand down.
Yeah,
Put his hand up and put it down.
You're in the room now.
David, if it's not you, then it's me. So all I would ask on a very localized basis is, James, please, we have a what used to be a police station in Ivor, as you're well aware. It's now council offices, but we have cops that stop there for a cup of tea. Can we have a little bit more visibility of those folks, not in their cars, but walking around the streets, just a little bit more visibility? And I think that will help us with the ASB issues that we've experienced recently. And that's as simple as that. I know it's very localized. Thank you very much.
Yeah, understood. My counterpoint is the patrol app is exactly targeting that issue. We recognise that maybe there is a cultural or a human disposition towards using a car when you can. Maybe that's a generational thing as well. There is value to foot patrol. It's recognised. It's actually, there is an evidence base from an academic perspective on that. It is something that we're directing our teams with. Again, watch this space. There are gaps. There are resilience issues when it comes to our team within that vicinity. Again, some of the candidates that we are recruiting in, I'm not saying they'll be a carbon copy of Dan, but they'll be very like-minded. They will be more visible. They will be more embedded within the local community of Ivors.
Thank you very much, James.
James, can I just ask you a very specific question? Having a Bobby on the beat, is that the future of policing or not?
Okay, from a community policing perspective, it's always going to have value. When it comes to effective delivery of response policing and actually being able to deploy at a level where we can do so at greatest effect, no, is the short answer of it.
Well, no, I'm not.
It's a comfort blanket to us all. I'd love to have a Bobby, posted on the corner of my road. I'd love it, but that's not going to be a realistic expectation.
It's not, what you're saying, it's not modern police work.
It has value because I'm old school. I remember as a beat Bobby standing on a green and just watching the world go by, because part of that meant that I was able to absorb more information. If I'm walking past something, unless I the planets align and I happen to be there at the time, then actually sometimes being stationary is much better than just trying to maximum coverage at a double time walking speed. So I think it's to do with learning those type of old school skills. They certainly have a place, but it's not a panacea by any means.
No. Just looking at Robert, you want a question?
Yep, just one very quick one. We've got a local event coming up, James. Should we email you to invite you or one of your constables to it, or somebody else?
I'm going to offer you a couple of points. I mean, to be honest, the best way by which we field those is through the online portal. I've dealt with one of those as of today, so they arrive with us quite quickly. So there is a means by which Thames Valley thamesvalley.police.uk, where there is a click button exercise to go through. Alternatively, you can potentially reach out to Roy. He's in the chat, roy.evans@thamesvalley.police.uk, because he would be covering your area.
Sorry, someone else was talking there. Was that Roy?
Yeah, you had
Evans?
somebody with
Well,
an open mind.
Jane Fallon has got a question in the chat room, but we are slightly running out of time. But you know, as long as people aren't bored, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll get in touch one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, are you? You probably need to demute, probably.
I'm interested about this more visibility on the streets. I see on all the Facebook pages that the community policing is quite visible in Denham and in Ivor. However, in my area, I would say I have seen a community police person once in the last year. Is it possible that we could have a breakdown of how often there has been community on foot policing in each of the Missendens, etc.?
Okay, so part of the app that I've described to you will offer you that data. It's still in its early stages, but yes, in due time, that data will be available. It's dependent upon those designated hotspots, but also we have additional data. So just general patrols are also captured. And so that data will be available once we've had enough to compile, as it were. Certainly it's stuff that that I and my supervisory team have oversight of, and yeah, I mean, your point is one that I remember from, and not you specifically, but I was fielding similar calls 25 years ago as a PC in Chalfont and Giles. I never see you, and I was thinking, well, I can't make myself more visible, and to a point where that particular individual, I got their address, and I put on my blue lights every time I drove past their house, which I'm sure was to their great annoyance eventually. But often, I mean, if we're doing our job right, it's criminals operate in those times where the general public are not broadly about. And if we're going to be effective in delivering policing, some of that is being at the times when criminals are about, not the broader public. So the way in which we try and capture our visibility is by means of our social media and by means of those data apps that I'm describing, so that the broader public can be more reassured that actually we're delivering in the right areas, not doing it as some comfort blanket. We're not just there to reassure the communities, we're actually there to deliver policing. And I'm sure that everyone would prefer that our focus was not just as a modifier, but actually to be effective and to prevent crime.
James, thanks very much. I'm conscious we're now slightly out of time, but Shadil, you've got a question?
Thank you, Andy.
If you're still with us, are you still with us?
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. First, excellent presentation. Thank you so much for that. My more less of a question, I mean, a direct question, but I was intrigued by the seasonality bit which was presented in it, whereas that in a certain time of the year, it would be burglary. In the other time of the year, it would be, you know, on the street, sort of stealing and all that stuff. I'm just wondering how this seasonality bit will come into the overall police strategy. I mean, this seems pretty, you know, solid data in the sense, you know, this month somebody's going to do this, and the next month somebody else is going to do this. So I was just wondering on that one.
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know whether I don't have a good comment on it. I don't know whether anyone else has.
Well, I'm sure James.
I'm not sure I grasped the whole question. Certainly, I think I got that you're asking how we reflect seasonal trends in how we're delivering policing. Certainly,
exactly. Yeah, because the data itself is coming, saying that in certain periods of the month, the burglary will rise. And in the certain periods of the month, there won't be any burglary, but there would be minor thefts and, this jobbing sort of stuff. So if the data is so clear and it is like a repeating trend over a period of time, then how does this feed into the actual work or the actual sort of on the ground work that the police are actually doing? That's yeah.
I think I've got it now. So what you're talking about is if we're light on burglaries one day or within 1 week of the month, and we're really intensively on another, what do we do? How does our working day change? So obviously, all crime investigation doesn't take place instantaneously. We cannot simply attend and solve a crime. It's not like a TV drama. However, what I would say is that part of the data that I've described here, we're looking for trends and patterns. We have specific bespoke crime data analysts that are looking at seasonal trends, monthly trends, daily trends, hours, all sorts of ways by which we look to try and identify when our peak offending is occurring. When it comes to other sort of crime trends, every day is different, is the situation. So as a snapshot, and I think this is what you're asking for, my working day starts with a management meeting that encompasses all of the senior management teams within the county, and we're looking at our respective departments' demands on that day, the resourcing we have, and making sure that we're cooperating between each other to make sure that we're best meeting that day's demands. That can sometimes have a subsequent afternoon meeting, both to check on how we're progressing, but also to change our plans if subsequent developments have taken place and we need to change them. So lots and lots of stuff going on. Part of that discussion will involve crime scenes that we're managing, prisoners that we have in custody, outstanding crimes to be attended, anything of particular significance that requires a community intervention and some intensified police presence. So lots and lots of discussion that takes place, which means that the police are a very refined beast from the 3 decades that I've been witness to them, where we are very lean, and sometimes I mutter under my breath when I'm sitting in a hospital waiting room, thinking how the police would manage some of these things. However, it's easy to be the armchair expert, isn't it? However, certainly from my internal perspective, we're delivering on a real-time basis, adapting to the requirements of that day. So I can attest to the fact that on an hour-by-hour basis, we're making sure that we're delivering the best bang for our buck.
Friends, I have to move this on because we are now at 8:10, and we passed our in terms of what we're going to vote on in terms of the priorities. I think it's fairly clear in terms of the data that Robert's put forward. Bless him. It's burglary, drugs, and speeding. Robert, are going to fight me for that or not?
No, but I will remind you that there was a bit of a fudge that I think Richard Vine introduced, which was to say serious acquisitive crime, which can therefore include burglary and vehicles.
Yeah, but we need to give a good steer to the inspector on this, don't we? But it's
let's see what the inspector thinks.
Burglary and drugs, and if you fancy spading, James, it's up to you. Well,
it really isn't up to me. What I would say is that vehicle crime will receive its attention, the same as everything that we've mentioned. Violence against women and girls, serious violence, they are all going to be...
No, they're all important matters.
What we're looking for is to narrow the field when it comes to the community's concerns. My recommendation to you would be that we have a public mandate. It's done by a transparent and democratic process when it comes to what we escalate to counterparts and chief officers as to how the community is looking to direct what policing capacity we have. I suggest that burglary, speeding, and drugs is as good as any.
I've got a point of view on it, but it doesn't matter because I'm the chair. But I would change that list in a heartbeat. But that's by the by. That's what has been decided democratically, local domestic violence is a monster, and it doesn't feature. But anyway, that's not a matter for now because we're over time. And I'm really grateful for all of you to come and join in and talk about all this stuff.
Yep.
And particularly James and Robert, who work really hard, making sure that we listen to people and do decent work.
Yep.
And decent work is very important.
Yep.
And let's hope once the election's out of the way, we can get on with the more decent work.
Yep. And thank you to everybody.
Well, and Paul, thank you to you, and thank you to everyone who's joined in.
Yep, absolutely brilliant. Thank you,
Happy
James.
evening.
Thank you for your team.
But if you've got any points of view or anything, just send them to Robert. Don't send them to me.
Or to James.
Okay. I get enough points of view anyway, I promise you. Good evening, everyone.
Well, James, thank you so much because all the work you do in the police, I know you get blamed for everything, but you do great work.
No, thank you very much for everyone's participation. What I would say is, this week, I know that I have a great bunch of a great team with me, who are really invested in trying to make a difference for our communities. We cannot carry the mantle alone. We need the community support, and this forum is testament to that. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you in due course.
Yep.
But Ray's come back into the room. Let's make sure we don't have more conversations about parking in Chesham because I'm going to lose the will to live.
All right.
So will I.
Roy, did we get a recording of that at all? That meeting.
It is still recording.
Oh, okay, good. Well, that's good. That's fantastic. All right.
Anyway.
Excellent. And on.
Thanks for joining in, and it's so good that you are involved in the community, and it's brilliant because it is what it is.
Very much,
It just is. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, cheers. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.